Atlanta has always been a lighthouse of racial and religious tolerance in the South. And we are shocked and amazed that this awful thing could happen in our midst.
Our temple was prominent. It was the first Jewish congregation in Atlanta, and it wasn't just the rabbi, it was that his predecessor, who came in 1895, had been the voice of Atlanta Jewry, and actually eventually it was all of Georgia, to the Christian community. When Rabbi Rothschild came in, he already had a particular position in the general community that had been created by his predecessor, just as he built on that for his successor, who Rabbi Sugarman went into civil rights and along the same path, but the need for it had changed, so he came in and championed the current need for his generation, and now Rabbi Berg and his associates are doing the same thing for today's needs. Well, civil rights then really meant integrating schools. Okay, that was the focus. And there were people, Rabbi and others called them the silent majority, who really believed in doing the right things, but they were afraid to speak out. They were really afraid and disagreed with what the rabbi was doing. They felt he was, sticking his neck out, and therefore the temple's neck, too far. And gradually he was able to bring, fortunately, a vocal majority of them over to his way of thinking. Rabbi made it such a point of being sure that everything was kept as calm as possible, and that everything went on as scheduled. It really did. I mean, even a wedding that was supposed to take place that morning at the temple took place that morning, just not at the temple. And he was very proud of the fact that before they left for the day, that there would be a sign up. Now, we have the big sign that says the temple in stone is there now. He wanted to be sure that his sermon for the next Friday night was going to be, sermon subject was going to be listed there, so that when people were stopped in traffic on the way to work on Monday morning, they'd read it. And what it was, and none shall make them afraid. The really big thing that encouraged the congregation, and that, I mean, even bigger than that, much bigger, that kept the congregation from being afraid, was that there was an immediate outpouring of love from the whole community. This immediate reaction from just everybody, high and low as far as education and attitudes and so forth concerned, that part of it was motivated by Atlanta is a city of churches, and you don't mess with churches even if they're synagogues. And I think that people were just absolutely outraged that this would happen to any house of worship in their city. And the reason that I called that portion of the history the bomb that healed, because it caused Mayor Hartsfield to give this marvelous response that he did, which opened the ability of the so-called good people in Atlanta and in some places in the South to speak out. Not only Mayor Hartsfield at the time of the bombing, but by 1965, Mayor Ivan Allen was in charge, and both of them did the right thing. And even they were both brought up as, I would say, in typical Southern thinking, which meant that they probably had quite a debate with themselves before they became in favor of integrated schools and things like that. But they could see what was good, what was right, and also what was good for the city. Now, which of those was more important, I'll let you figure out. But nevertheless, they did it. But when I was a child, no matter whatever it was that my mother told me to do that I didn't want to do, her answer would be, "You'll do it and you'll like it." Well, they may have done it, and of course I answered back, I'll do it, yes, but I won't like it. The other reason that it was like, in my view, lancing a boil, because the boil being the Leo Frank case from 1915, which had, healed on the surface, skin grew over it, and people didn't talk about it or notice it, but it was there and it was still festering. My parents were ahead of their time, except when it came to anti-Semitism. They were still very much traumatized by the Frank case. You know, people remembered Leo Frank. It happened before I was born, but even people who were very little older than I were still traumatized by the way it had affected their parents. So the larger reason was that President Eisenhower was approached with the news of what had happened that morning while he was at a public forum where it was just a few weeks before a midterm election. And as I understand, I don't know whether it was in New York or not, but I think New York was a largely Jewish audience. And his reaction was, this isn't America, we don't do that. I'm going to send the FBI in. Well, that was a big change, because for at least 1 year, and I forget how much before that, we had been seeing news of what happened other places and thinking, why in the world doesn't the Attorney General send in the FBI? Well, we knew, the J. Edgar Hoover wasn't going to send in anybody on his own, but why didn't the Attorney General do it? Well, when President Eisenhower said he was going to do it, the Attorney General had to do it. Yeah. And that's when these atrocities that occurred all over in other places in the South had to be apprehended. Atlanta has always prided itself on, the quote, oft-quoted motto, "City too busy to hate." Right. And it's always been progressive compared with any place else in the South. I mean, we and friends of ours, if they believed in civil rights, and then they had difficulty even having civil conversations with their relatives and friends in other places, even in Georgia. I mean, you just didn't go to see your cousins in Savannah if you could help it, because you didn't want to get into a conversation. Atlanta was always different.
Atlanta has always been a lighthouse of racial and religious tolerance in the South. And we are shocked and amazed that this awful thing could happen in our midst. But my friends, here you see the end result of bigotry and intolerance